A crowded airport gate is a theater of quiet judgment. We see the hoodie before we see the person. We see the skin color before we see the character. But what happens when the person we dismiss is the one person we should fear? When two police officers, fueled by prejudice and a false report, decide to make an example of a young black woman, they believe they have all the power. But they are about to learn that the woman they are publicly handcuffing holds a power that can end their careers in a single terrifying instant. Before we begin, comment where you are watching from today, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Now, let's get into it. The hum of JFK International Airport's Terminal 4 was a familiar white noise to Maya Lincoln. It was 8 a.m., and the cavernous space was already a river of anxious travelers, overpriced coffee, and the perpetual antiseptic smell of cleaning solution and jet fuel. Gate B-26, servicing American Airlines Flight 110 to London Heathrow, was a microcosm of the whole chaotic world. Businessmen in crisp, wrinkled suits frantically typed on their laptops, families tried to wrangle sugar-fueled children, and clusters of students huddled over their phones. And then, there was Maya. To anyone who bothered to look, she was invisible in the most conspicuous way. She was 25, slight of build, and wearing an oversized plain gray hoodie, hood pulled partially up. Faded jeans, a pair of worn-out sneakers, and a simple black backpack completed the look. She sat apart from the main cluster, her back against a pillar, her gaze sweeping the boarding area. She was, by every measure, the person least likely to be in the first-class lounge. But Maya wasn't just at the gate. She was working the gate. A man in an expensive-looking navy blue Brioni suit, Mr. Patterson, glanced at her, then glanced again. His lip curled in distaste. He was trying to finalize a merger deck on his laptop, and her intermittent gaze felt intrusive. He saw a loiterer, a problem. He flagged down the nearest gate agent, a woman named Brenda Higgins, whose stressed expression and tight-lipped smile suggested she was one delayed flight away from a breakdown. "Excuse me," Patterson said, his voice a low, entitled rumble. "That person," he nodded discreetly toward Maya, "has been staring at me and my screen for 10 minutes. She looks suspicious. She doesn't look like she belongs here." Brenda Higgins glanced at Maya. She saw exactly what Patterson saw. A young black woman in a hoodie, sitting on the floor, looking out of place among the business travelers. Brenda's own biases, amplified by the stress of a morning shift, clicked into place. This was an easy problem to solve. "I understand, sir. I'll handle it," Brenda said, her voice dripping with forced courtesy. Maya, oblivious to the quiet judgment, wasn't looking at Patterson at all. Her focus was on two other men, seated 20 feet away, pretending not to know each other. One was stocky, with a shaved head. The other was thin, with nervous, darting eyes. Maya knew them as the handler and the courier. She had been tracking them for 6 months as part of Operation Cross Atlantic, a sprawling FBI investigation into a human trafficking ring that used international flights to move its victims. The men were good. They were calm. But Maya was better. Her job today wasn't to arrest them. It was to observe, to track, and to ensure they led her to the next link in the chain upon landing in London. Her backpack, which Patterson and Brenda saw as a vagrant's satchel, contained a laptop with a direct encrypted link to the FBI's New York field office, a high-frequency transmitter, and, tucked in a hidden compartment, her service weapon and credentials. Brenda picked up the phone at the gate podium and dialed the Port Authority police substation. "This is Brenda Higgins at Gate B-26, she whispered, cupping her hand over the receiver. "I have a suspicious individual, refusing to move, possibly casing passengers. Young, black female, gray hoodie, black backpack." She listened. "Yes, I think you should send someone. She's making the first-class passengers nervous." She hung up, satisfied. She had done her job. She had protected her real customers. Maya felt the shift in the air before she saw them. The ambient noise of the gate seemed to dip. 2 Port Authority police officers were walking toward her. One was older, with a thick mustache and a stomach that strained against his duty belt. His name tag read Nolan. The other was younger, fitter, and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. His tag read Shaw. Nolan was the one in the lead. He walked with a heavy, deliberate swagger, his hand resting on his taser. He looked at Maya, and his expression hardened. This was exactly the kind of easy, low-effort confrontation that broke up the monotony of his shift. "Ma'am," Nolan barked, his voice loud enough to turn heads. Maya looked up slowly, her expression neutral. She'd been trained for this, for blending in, for de-escalation, but she also knew a bully when she saw one. "Morning, officers," she said, her voice calm and even. "Morning," Nolan sneered. "Going somewhere." "London eventually. Just like everyone else here," Maya said. "We've had a complaint that you're harassing passengers and refusing to move. You look a little lost." Nolan's eyes roamed over her, taking in the hoodie, the sneakers. He'd already tried and convicted her in his mind. "I'm just waiting for my flight to board, officer. I haven't spoken to anyone," Maya replied, keeping her hands visible, resting on her knees. "We're going to need to see some ID and a boarding pass," Nolan demanded. "Is there a problem?" "The problem," Nolan said, stepping closer, "is that you're not answering my question. ID. Now." Maya sighed internally. This was a complication, a dangerous one. She slowly reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out her New York driver's license and her boarding pass, handing them over. Nolan looked at the boarding pass first. "Maya Lincoln, seat 12A business class." He scoffed, looking at her hoodie. "Right, and I'm the King of England. This is probably fake." He looked at the ID. Maya Lincoln, 25 years old. This all looks very convenient. "It's all real, officer," Maya said, her patience thinning. Her targets were getting restless. The courier was looking at his watch. "What's in the bag, ma'am?" Nolan asked, tapping his boot against her backpack. And there it was, the line. "My personal belongings, officer," Maya said. "We've had a report of suspicious activity. I'm going to need to search that bag." "No," Maya said, her voice suddenly losing its casual softness. It wasn't a defiant no. It was a flat, cold, professional no. "You are not." Nolan's face flushed red. He looked at Shaw, then back at Maya, a smirk playing on his lips. He loved this part. "Oh, we got a constitutional scholar here, Shaw." "You are not," he mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "Ma'am, you are in a secure area of an international airport. I can and I will search that bag, or we can do this the hard way." "Officer Nolan," Maya said, standing up slowly, "I am telling you, you do not have probable cause. You are making a mistake." "The mistake," Nolan said, unsnapping the retaining strap on his handcuffs, "was you deciding to play tough with me." The gate was silent now. Everyone was watching. Patterson looked on with smug satisfaction. Brenda Higgins pretended to be busy with her computer, but her eyes were glued to the scene. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Nolan commanded. Maya's mind was racing. Her targets, the operation, the equipment. She couldn't let them search the bag, but she also couldn't blow her cover. Not here. Not in front of her targets. She had to de-escalate. "Officer, I am happy to cooperate, but I will not consent to a search. If you'd like to call your supervisor, I'm happy to wait." That was the final straw for Nolan. To him, her calm, articulate refusal was the ultimate sign of disrespect. It was a challenge to his authority, and he was going to win. "You're resisting!" he shouted, shoving Maya against the pillar. "You're resisting! Shaw, get her other arm!" "Nolan, wait!" Shaw said, his eyes wide. "Now, Shaw!" Nolan grabbed Maya's left arm, twisting it painfully behind her back. Maya, trained in defensive tactics, instinctively tensed, but she didn't fight back. She couldn't. Shaw, following his senior officer's order, grabbed her other arm. The cold, sharp click of the steel handcuffs locking around Maya's wrists echoed in the silent terminal. The metal was cold and tight against her skin. Officer Nolan, breathing heavily with exertion and self-importance, cinched the cuffs one notch tighter than necessary. Pain shot up Maya's forearms. The gate lounge, once a dull hum, was now a silent arena. Every eye was on her. Phones were out, small red lights glowing as dozens of people recorded her humiliation. Mr. Patterson, the man in the Brioni suit, nodded once, a grimly satisfied look on his face, before turning back to his laptop, as if the matter was now beneath him. Brenda, the gate agent, looked relieved, validated in her suspicion. "Now," Nolan grunted, yanking Maya upright by the chain of the cuffs. "You're coming with us. We're going to find out exactly who you are, little girl." The term little girl landed like a slap. Maya kept her face a mask of neutrality, but inside a cold, precise anger was building. It wasn't the hot anger of indignation. It was the focused rage of a professional whose mission was being compromised by a fool. Across the lounge, she saw her targets, the handler and the courier. They were watching. The courier looked nervous, but the handler was studying the scene with a chilling calmness. He was assessing the police presence. He was analyzing the threat. This was bad. This was catastrophically bad. Nolan and Shaw hadn't just detained a citizen. They had, in their bumbling arrogance, announced to two high-level criminals that this gate was under surveillance. They were burning her operation to the ground. "Nolan, we should just take her to the office," Shaw muttered, clearly uncomfortable with the public spectacle. The cameras were on him, too. "In a minute," Nolan said, playing to the crowd. He grabbed Maya's backpack, slinging it over his own shoulder. "We've got to secure the suspicious package. Might be a bomb," he said loudly, winking at a passenger. "It's not a bomb, officer," Maya said, her voice dangerously quiet. "And I advise you not to open it. That is property of the United States government." Nolan laughed. A loud, barking laugh. "Oh, now it's government property. First you're a lawyer, now you're a government mule. Which is it? You kids watch too many movies." He began to parade her toward the exit, shoving her lightly between the shoulder blades. "Let's go. Move." The walk from Gate B-26 to the Port Authority substation was the longest 200 yards of Maya's life. It was a walk of shame, engineered for maximum visibility. They passed a Starbucks, a duty-free shop, a currency exchange. With every step, travelers stopped to stare. They saw the narrative Nolan was painting. A young black troublemaker, probably caught stealing or starting a fight, being hauled away in handcuffs. "See what happens when you don't cooperate?" Nolan said to her, his voice low and menacing, the fake smile for the public gone. "We always win. You should have just let me look in the bag. Now you're looking at resisting arrest, assaulting an officer." "I never touched you, officer," Maya stated. "You tensed up. That's assault where I come from. And I'll find something in that bag of yours, don't you worry. Contraband, paraphernalia, I always do." This was his game. He wasn't just a cop. He was a predator who used his badge as camouflage. He found people who didn't fit his narrow worldview, people who looked wrong, poor or young, or in her case, black, and he squeezed them. He knew most couldn't fight back, couldn't afford a lawyer, and would plead out to whatever he charged them with just to make it go away. He had, quite literally, picked the wrong person. Shaw walked silently beside them, his face a mask of conflict. He knew this was wrong. He knew Nolan was on a power trip. But Nolan was his field training officer, a man who held Shaw's career in his hands. A complaint from Nolan could get him stuck on the overnight shift at the cargo docks for a year. So, Shaw said nothing. His silence was his complicity. "In here," Nolan said, shoving Maya through a gray, unmarked door into a small, windowless room. The room was suffocating. It smelled of stale coffee and body odor. There was a single metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs. It was the kind of temporary holding room where rights went to die. Nolan slammed the door shut, and the noise of the terminal was instantly cut off. The silence was heavy. "Sit," Nolan commanded, pushing her down into one of the chairs. The metal was cold against her legs. He dropped her backpack on the table with a heavy thud. "Right," Nolan said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's see what's in the government property bag." He reached for the main zipper. "Officer Nolan," Maya said, her voice cutting through the stale air. "For the last time, Do not touch that bag. Or what? Nolan laughed. You gonna bite me? You're interfering with a federal investigation. That is a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Wow, she's good, Shaw. She even knows the statutes. Too bad it's all bull. Nolan unzipped the main compartment. He saw a laptop, a few bundled cables, and a change of clothes. Ooh, scary. Adele, what's this, your homework? He pulled out the laptop. It was a standard-issue black laptop, thick and durable but nondescript. He tried to open it. Locked. What's the password? Justice. Officer Nolan, Maya said, you have just committed a federal crime. By opening that bag and attempting to access that device, you have tampered with classified material related to an active counter-trafficking operation. Nolan paused. There was something in her voice, the absolute lack of fear, the clinical precision of her words. A tiny, cold seed of doubt began to sprout in his gut. But he was in too deep now. To back down was to admit he was wrong. Shut up, he said, his bravado cracking. You're just trying to scare me. I'm not trying to scare you, officer. I am informing you of the consequences of your actions. You are out of your depth. We'll see about that, Nolan said, his anger flaring to mask his sudden fear. He dumped the entire contents of the bag onto the table. The change of clothes, a power bank, a water bottle, a small toiletries bag, and a small, hard-sided case. What's this? Nolan said, grabbing the case. It was locked with a small combination lock. Drugs? A weapon? Officer Shaw, Maya said, ignoring Nolan completely and turning her gaze to the younger cop who was standing frozen by the door. Your partner is about to make a mistake that will end his career and yours. He has illegally detained me, illegally searched my property, and is now attempting to access classified equipment. I am giving you one chance to stop him. Shaw looked at Maya, then at Nolan. Nolan, maybe we should call a supervisor. She's very specific. She's a liar, Nolan roared. She's trying to divide us. I'm opening this box. He pulled his pocket knife out and jammed it into the lock mechanism, trying to pry it open. That's enough, Maya said. She'd given them every chance. Her targets were probably already through security, her surveillance blown. The mission was secondary now. This was about survival, and more importantly, about justice. You had your chance, she said. Nolan was still wrestling with the lock. Shut up, shut up, shut. Officer Shaw, Maya commanded, her voice changing. The quiet, polite victim was gone. In her place was someone else entirely. The voice was cold, hard, and radiated an authority that Shaw had never heard in his life. It stopped him cold. Take your left hand, Maya ordered. Reach into the front left pocket of my jeans. Do it. Slowly. Nim pulled his pocket knife out and jammed it into the lock mechanism, trying to pry it open. That's enough, Maya said. She'd given them every chance. Her targets were probably already through security, her surveillance blown. The mission was secondary now. This was about survival, and more importantly, about justice. You had your chance, she said. Nolan was still wrestling with the lock. Shut up, shut up, shut. Officer Shaw, Maya commanded, her voice changing. The quiet, polite victim was gone. In her place was someone else entirely. The voice was cold, hard, and radiated an authority that Shaw had never heard in his life. It stopped him cold. Take your left hand, Maya ordered. Reach into the front left pocket of my jeans. Do it. Slowly. Nolan stopped fiddling with the lock. What? Shaw, don't listen to her. She's playing games. Do it, officer, Maya repeated. Shaw, mesmerized by her certainty, took a hesitant step forward. He reached, his fingers trembling, into her pocket. His fingers brushed against a small, stiff leather object. He pulled it out. It was a black leather wallet designed to hold a badge. Open it, Maya commanded. Shaw fumbled with the clasp. He opened it. The silence in the room became absolute. The world stopped. For Officer Shaw, the air in the small, stale room seemed to crystallize. His eyes were glued to the object in his hand. It wasn't a fake. It wasn't a novelty. The gold shield was heavy, intricately detailed and unmistakable. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Above the eagle, the credentials read, Special Agent Maya A. Lincoln. Shaw's blood turned to ice. His hand, the one holding the badge, began to tremble violently. He looked from the badge to Maya's face. The lost little girl was gone. In her place was a federal officer whose eyes were burning with a cold, controlled fury that was more terrifying than any shouting. "Nolan," Shaw whispered. His voice was a dry croak. "What? What is it?" Nolan snapped, still focused on the locked case. "Nolan, stop. I told you to shut up, Shaw. Nolan!" Shaw screamed, his voice cracking with pure, undiluted panic. Nolan spun around, his face red with rage. "What is your—" He stopped. Shaw was holding the badge out, his arm shaking as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Nolan's eyes dropped to the shield. The color drained from his face. It didn't happen slowly. It was as if a plug had been pulled. All the blood, all the bravado, all the air vanishing from his body at once. His mouth fell open. The pocket knife clattered from his limp fingers onto the floor. He stared at the badge. He stared at Maya. Back to the badge. This was the freeze. It was a moment of complete system failure. His brain, which had been running on a high of prejudice and power, had just slammed into a brick wall. This is, he stammered. "It's a fake. It has to be. You bought this." "It's not fake, officer," Maya said, her voice like gravel. "Now take the cuffs off me." Nolan didn't move. He was paralyzed, a statue of stupid disbelief. "Shaw!" Maya barked, using her command voice. "The key, my left wrist, now." Shaw jumped as if zapped by a taser. He fumbled at his belt, his fingers clumsy, trying to get the handcuff key. He dropped it. "Pathetic," Maya spat. "Pick it up." Shaw scooped up the key, his face pale and slick with sweat. He rushed over and jammed the key into the lock on her left cuff. He fumbled, but finally, the first cuff clicked open. He moved to the second. Click. The handcuffs fell away to the floor. Maya didn't move from the chair. She slowly, deliberately, brought her arms around to the front, rubbing her raw, red wrists. The indentations from the metal were deep. She held out her hand. "My credentials, Officer Shaw." Shaw practically threw the badge wallet into her hand. "And my backpack," she said. Nolan was still frozen, his back against the wall, his eyes wide with a dawning, sickening horror. We got a call," he whispered. "A complaint. A suspicious—" "You fit the description." "I fit the description," Maya repeated. It wasn't a question, it was a judgment. A young black woman in a hoodie. That was the description, wasn't it? The gate agent," Nolan babbled. "You, both of you," Maya said, standing up. She was no longer the one being interrogated. She was now the one in charge. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had inverted violently. "You are to stand against that wall. Do not speak. Do not move. Do not breathe unless I tell you to." "Now wait a minute," Nolan tried, a last flicker of his old self. "You can't." "Stand!" Maya roared. The two Port Authority officers, men who had uniforms, guns, and the full authority of the state of New York, flinched like misbehaving children and scrambled to the far wall side by side. Maya calmly walked to the table. She zipped her backpack shut, wincing as her wrist throbbed. She slung it over one shoulder. Then she pulled out her own phone. "You had no probable cause," she said, not looking at them, her fingers flying across the screen. "You had a Karen complaint from a gate agent and a biased passenger, and instead of de-escalating, instead of being professional, you chose to humiliate me. You chose to put your hands on me." "We were just doing our job," Shaw whimpered from the wall. "Your job?" Maya spun around. "Your job is to protect and serve, not to harass and assault. Your job is to use discretion. But you, Nolan, you don't have discretion. You have a God complex and a prejudice. And you, Shaw, you have no spine." She put the phone to her ear. "This is Special Agent Lincoln," she said, her voice all business. "Badge number 749J. I have an agent interference situation at JFK Terminal 4, Port Authority substation. I have been wrongfully detained and assaulted by 2 PAPD officers. She paused, listening. That's correct. Cuffed and detained. They have also compromised a Class 4 federal investigation. Operation Cross Atlantic, yes, sir. Nolan's knees audibly knocked together. Federal investigation. This was no longer about a complaint. This was about prison time. I need a supervisor from the New York field office here. Now, Maya continued. And I need you to contact the Port Authority Chief of Police and the Director of Aviation for JFK. Get them all here. This room. 10 minutes. She hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was Officer Nolan's ragged, panicked breathing. You're FBI, Nolan whispered, as if saying it aloud might make it make sense. Why were you dressed like that? Maya looked at him with pure contempt. Like what, officer? Like a person? Like someone you thought you could push around? That's my cover. It's called blending in. Something you clearly know nothing about. I was tracking 2 high-priority targets. 2 human traffickers. They were on my flight. She pointed a finger at Nolan. And you and your little show. You cuffed me in front of them. You paraded me through the terminal. You blew my cover. You jeopardized a 6-month multi-agency investigation. You may have just let 2 monsters walk free and cost lives. Shaw looked like he was going to be sick. He gagged, leaning his head against the wall. Oh, you're going to be a lot sicker than that, Officer Shaw, Maya said grimly. The call I just made wasn't to a colleague. It was to my assistant special agent in charge, Mark Dalton. And if you know anything, you know he does not play. Nolan's face was ashen. He knew that name. Everyone in New York law enforcement knew ASAC Mark Dalton. He was a legend, a bulldog, a man who ate crooked cops for breakfast. The freeze was over. The terror was just beginning. Nolan stammered. We can just forget this, right? A misunderstanding. We let you go, you make your flight. Maya actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that held no humor. Forget? Officer, I'm going to bury you. You put your hands on a federal agent. You compromised my case. You humiliated me for the crime of being black in an airport. You are not just getting suspended. You're not just getting fired. I'm going to personally see to it that the Department of Justice charges you with interference with a federal agent, deprivation of rights under color of law, and unlawful imprisonment. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. Your careers are over. Your pensions are gone. And if my targets get away, I'll be at your hearing every single day to remind the judge exactly what you did. The door to the small room burst open. But it wasn't a cop. It was a man in a perfectly tailored $5,000 suit with graying temples and eyes that looked like they could burn holes in steel. Agent Lincoln, he said, his voice a low baritone. ASAC Dalton, Maya replied, her shoulders sagging just a fraction in relief. Mark Dalton's eyes swept the room. He saw Maya's red wrists. He saw the 2 pale, terrified Port Authority cops pressed against the wall. He saw the contents of her bag on the table. His face, already grim, became a mask of controlled Arctic fury. He turned to Nolan and Shaw. You 2, he said, have just destroyed your lives. ASAC Mark Dalton didn't just enter a room, he conquered it. He was followed by 2 other men in dark suits, other agents from the field office, and trailing behind them, looking like he'd just been woken from a nightmare, was the Port Authority police captain, a man named Peterson. Mark, Captain Peterson began, his face pale. Don't, Dalton said, holding up a hand. Don't say a word until I've processed this. He walked over to Maya, his eyes fixed on her wrists. Are you injured, Agent? Bruised. My left shoulder is strained. Nothing permanent, Maya said. Good. Dalton turned his gaze back to Nolan and Shaw, who looked like they were facing a firing squad. Captain Peterson, Dalton said, his voice dangerously calm. These 2 men are your officers? Officer Nolan and Officer Shaw. Yes, Mark, they... Officer Nolan, Officer Shaw. Dalton addressed them directly. "You are to surrender your service weapons, your badges, and your credentials. Now, place them on the table." "Sir, it was a misunderstanding," Nolan blurted out, desperation making his voice high and reedy. "We had a complaint from the gate agent. A passenger said she was suspicious." Dalton took a step toward him. He was a full head taller than Nolan, and where Nolan was built of flab and bluster, Dalton was all lean muscle and coiled energy. "A complaint," Dalton said, his voice low, "and that gives you the right to publicly assault and handcuff a citizen? That gives you the right to ignore her when she tells you she won't consent to a search? That gives you the right to dump classified federal property on a table?" He pointed to the laptop. "That laptop, Officer Nolan, contains the active case file for Operation Cross Atlantic. If you had managed to brute force your way past the encryption, which you wouldn't have, you would have compromised the identities of 3 undercover agents in Europe and a dozen confidential informants. Your misunderstanding could have gotten people killed." Captain Peterson looked like he was going to faint. "Oh my God. Sir, I didn't know," Nolan pleaded. "That's the point," Dalton roared, his composure finally cracking. "You didn't know. You didn't ask. You didn't de-escalate. You saw a young black woman in a hoodie, and your tiny, prejudiced brain jumped to threat. You didn't see a citizen. You didn't see a passenger. And you damn sure didn't see a federal agent who has more tactical training and a higher clearance than you will ever dream of." Dalton turned to Shaw. "And you stood there. You let him. You put your hands on her. You're just as guilty. You're a coward. Place your weapons on the table. That was not a request," Dalton commanded, slowly, his hands shaking so badly he could barely unholster his weapon. Officer Nolan unbuckled his duty belt and laid it on the table. The thud of the gun and cuffs was a sound of finality. Shaw did the same, tears now openly streaming down his face. "Captain Peterson," Dalton said, "these men are off your force. As of right now, they are suspended pending termination. And that is just the beginning. My office will be filing federal charges by noon." "Mark, please," Peterson begged. "It's a black eye. Can't we handle this internally? Firing, suspension, retraining." Dalton looked at him with such contempt that Peterson shrank back. "Internally? Captain, your officer just assaulted one of my agents. Your officer compromised a case I've been building for a year. This isn't a black eye. This is a cancer, and I'm cutting it out. These two are the tumor. Your department's lack of training is the disease." Dalton looked at his own agents. "Get them out of here. Take them to the main substation and read them their rights. They are being detained for interference with a federal agent." The 2 FBI agents stepped forward, each taking one of the now former cops by the arm. "You can't arrest me, I'm a cop," Nolan shrieked, his mind finally snapping. "This is police brutality." Maya, who had been watching silently, spoke up. "No, officer. This," she said, rubbing her wrist, "is what you thought was police brutality. What's happening to you right now? This is just consequences. We call it karma." Nolan and Shaw were dragged from the room. The door shut, leaving Maya, Dalton, and Captain Peterson in the suffocating silence. "Captain," Dalton said, his voice returning to a lethal calm. "Who was the gate agent?" Peterson swallowed. "Higgins. Brenda Higgins." "Get her," Dalton said. Captain Peterson spoke into his radio. 5 minutes later, the door opened, and Brenda Higgins was escorted in by another Port Authority officer. She looked confused and annoyed. "What is this? I'm in the middle of boarding a—" She stopped when she saw Maya. Maya was no longer the cuffed problem from the gate. She was standing next to a man who radiated authority, her backpack on, her arms crossed. Brenda's eyes darted from Maya to Captain Peterson and her stomach dropped. "Brenda Higgins?" ASAC Dalton asked. "Yes. What's going on? Is this about the girl? Did you find something in her bag?" Dalton's expression was unreadable. "The girl, Miss Higgins, is Special Agent Maya Lincoln of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Brenda's hands flew to her mouth. "What? No. She was just sitting there." "She was just sitting there doing her job, Miss Higgins," Dalton said. A job you interfered with. A job that your call to the police may have completely destroyed. You reported a suspicious individual. What exactly was suspicious about her? She was watching, Brenda stammered. A passenger complained, Mr. Patterson. He said she was watching his laptop. She was in a hoodie. She didn't look like she belonged. Didn't look like she belonged, Dalton repeated, savoring the words. Didn't look like she belonged in business class? Is that what you mean, Miss Higgins, because she's black? Because she's young? Because she wasn't wearing a suit? No. I mean, it's just, we have a protocol. Your protocol is profiling, Dalton cut her off. You used your position of authority as an agent of American Airlines to instigate a false police report based on your own personal bias. The two officers who responded, Officers Nolan and Shaw, escalated your false report into a physical assault and an unlawful detention of a federal agent. I didn't tell them to arrest her, Brenda cried, terror dawning. You loaded the gun, Miss Higgins. They pulled the trigger. Those officers have been suspended and are currently being charged with federal crimes. Brenda burst into tears. Oh my God! Am I going to be arrested? I'm not interested in you, Dalton said dismissively. My colleagues in the U.S. Attorney's Office might be, but what I am interested in is making sure American Airlines understands the liability you have just exposed them to. Captain Peterson, please escort Miss Higgins back to her gate. I'm sure her airline's corporate legal team will want to speak with her before she's fired. Peterson, eager to do something right, nodded and gently guided the sobbing gate agent out of the room. The door closed again. It was just Maya and Dalton. Hell of a morning, Lincoln, Dalton said, a small, grim smile on his face. You have no idea, sir, Maya said, slumping against the table. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and the throbbing in her wrists. The targets? Dalton asked. Blew them, Maya said, disgust in her voice. They saw the whole thing. The handler was watching. They knew the gate was hot. They're gone. They'll have dumped their phones, aborted the route. Maybe not, Dalton said. He tapped his earpiece. I had the Heathrow team scrambled the second you called. They're on standby. Your targets may have been spooked, but they're arrogant. They might think this was just a random profiling incident, unrelated to them. It's a slim chance, sir, Maya said. It's the only one we've got. You're grounded. Your cover here is blown. I'm pulling you. We'll have another agent meet the flight just in case, but your part in this is done. No, Maya said. Dalton raised an eyebrow. No, that was an order, Agent. Sir, they saw me get arrested. They saw a black girl in a hoodie get harassed by racist cops. They didn't see a federal agent. They saw exactly what Nolan and Patterson and Higgins saw. They think I'm just a civilian. They think they're safe. They'll get on that plane, and the handler will be laughing about it. Dalton was silent for a moment, processing. They're going to get on that flight, Maya insisted. They think they're in the clear. The London team can still grab them on the other side. My cover isn't blown. It's just been reinforced in the most humiliating way possible. The operation is still viable. You're sure? Dalton asked. I am. But I'm not getting on that flight, sir. I'm compromised. But the case might not be. Dalton nodded, his respect for her growing. She was right. In their racist arrogance, Nolan and the others had inadvertently provided her targets with the perfect misdirection. All right, Dalton said. I'll let the London ASAC know. They'll run with it. You, Lincoln, are going to the field office. You're going to write the most detailed report of your life. Every word Nolan said. Every person who watched. We are going to make an example of them. The DOJ is already spinning up a civil rights investigation. What about Mr. Patterson? Maya asked, remembering the smug man in the Brioni suit. Dalton's smile was predatory. Oh, Mr. Patterson is about to have a very, very bad day. Filing a false report that leads to the obstruction of a federal case. His company's lawyers are going to have a field day with him. I've already got an agent tracking him down. He's not getting on that flight either. The hard karma, as Maya had called it, wasn't just a single event. It was a shockwave, and it was just getting started. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. For Officer Nolan, the tough guy act shattered the moment he was placed in a holding cell. Not in his own precinct, but in the federal detention center downtown. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, a woman with a ferocious reputation, unsealed the indictment. Nolan was charged with interference with a federal agent in the performance of duties, deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy to obstruct justice. His entire career was over. His pension was forfeited. The Port Authority Police Union, after reviewing the video from the gate, which had of course gone viral, and ASAC Dalton's official complaint, dropped him from their legal protection. He was radioactive. He was facing, at minimum, 10 years in federal prison. The man who saw himself as the last line of defense was now a federal inmate, his life in ruins because he couldn't stand being calmly refused by a black woman. For Officer Shaw, the path was slightly different, but no less devastating. Faced with the same charges and seeing his life evaporate, he did the only thing he could. He flipped. He agreed to testify against Nolan in exchange for a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of conspiracy, losing his job, his pension, and his right to ever carry a firearm again. He would avoid prison, but would live with the shame and the felony on his record for the rest of his life, the price of his cowardice. For Brenda Higgins, the American Airlines gate agent, the firing was swift. By the time Maya was back at the field office, Brenda was being escorted out of the terminal, her employee ID revoked. The airline, facing a massive lawsuit from the Department of Justice and a PR nightmare from the viral video, issued a public apology. They settled with the DOJ for an undisclosed multi-million-dollar sum and agreed to a mandatory department-wide racial bias and de-escalation training program to be overseen by a federal monitor. Brenda became a pariah in the airline industry, unable to get a job. For Mr. Patterson, the man in the Brioni suit, the consequences were corporate. ASAC Dalton's agents had indeed pulled him from the flight. He was detained, questioned, and ultimately released. But the damage was done. His company's name was leaked to the press in connection with the incident. His CEO, furious at the embarrassment and the legal exposure, called an emergency board meeting. Mr. Patterson was fired for conduct unbecoming of a senior executive. His merger deck was worthless. He had lost a multi-million-dollar deal and his job, all because he was annoyed by a woman in a hoodie. The viral video of Maya's arrest, which had initially been flooded with comments supporting the police, underwent a seismic shift as the truth emerged. The narrative flipped. News outlets picked up the story. FBI agent wrongfully arrested at JFK in shocking profiling incident. The public comments turned from hatred for Maya to venom for Nolan, Shaw, and Brenda. They were, in the court of public opinion, found guilty long before their trials. And the operation? ASAC Dalton's instincts and Maya's had been correct. The handler and the courier, convinced the incident was just a random act of police racism, had boarded the flight. They'd probably even shared a laugh about it. But when they landed at Heathrow, the London Metropolitan Police and Maya's FBI counterparts were waiting. The moment they stepped off the jet bridge, they were swarmed. The operation was a success. The trafficking ring was broken, and due to the evidence on the handler, 3 victims were rescued from a safe house in London. Maya had not just endured the humiliation. She had used it. She had weaponized their prejudice against them. The hours that followed were a blur of sterile, fluorescent-lit rooms and the bitter taste of stale coffee. Maya wasn't on a flight to London. She was at the FBI's New York field office in Lower Manhattan, a fortress of glass and steel that felt a million miles away from the chaos of JFK. The adrenaline had long since evaporated, leaving behind a bone-deep chill and a tremor in her hands that she couldn't seem to control. She sat in a formal debriefing room, not unlike the one Nolan had thrown her into, but this one was clean, carpeted, and had a one-way mirror. An agent from the Office of Professional Responsibility, Internal Affairs, was documenting her official statement. A female agent, kind but clinical, had just finished taking high-resolution photographs of her wrists. The skin was broken in 2 places. the imprints of the handcuffs' teeth a series of angry red dashes against her brown skin, already darkening into a deep, ugly purple. And he stated, "You kids watch too many movies." The OPR agent, Agent Kelly, asked, her own pen moving rapidly. "Yes," Maya confirmed, her voice hoarse. "That was just before he began to parade me through the terminal." "And Officer Shaw?" "He was complicit. He said nothing. He followed Nolan's orders. He put his hands on me. He held my arm while Nolan cuffed me." "And your repeated warnings that he was interfering with a federal investigation?" "He ignored them. He called me a liar. He mimicked me in a high-pitched voice." Saying it out loud made a fresh, hot wave of humiliation wash over her. This was the part that stung more than the cuffs, the utter dismissal, the gleeful, public degradation. "Thank you, Agent Lincoln," Kelly said, closing her file. "Your statement is clear. The U.S. Attorney's Office has already been briefed. ASAC Dalton is handling the operational fallout." She paused, her professional mask softening. "Are you all right, Maya? Really?" Maya looked at her hands, finally still. "I will be, but I keep thinking, what if I wasn't me? What if I was just a girl in a hoodie? What if I didn't have a badge in my pocket?" Agent Kelly's expression was grim. "Then you'd be in a cell at Queens Central Booking right now, charged with assaulting an officer, and no one would have believed you." She stood. "Go home, Lincoln, get some rest. You've done more than enough." But Maya couldn't go home. Not yet. She spent the next 3 hours in a separate, soundproofed room typing. She wrote the most detailed report of her life, as Dalton had ordered. Every word she could remember, every sneer from Nolan, the satisfied smirk on Mr. Patterson's face, the relieved, complicit look from Brenda Higgins, the way the crowd stared, the phones held high. She typed until her fingers ached and her raw wrists burned. She was documenting not just a crime, but a deep systemic rot, and her report was the scalpel. When she finally emerged, the office was dark. The night skyline of Manhattan, a brilliant, cold tapestry outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. ASAC Dalton was waiting for her, leaning against her desk, a paper cup of what smelled like bad whiskey in his hand. He pushed it toward her. "It's not coffee," he said. "Good," she replied, taking a sip. The burn was immediate, cutting through the numbness. "Heathrow team made the grab," he said without preamble. "You were right. The handler and the courier got on the flight, arrogant as kings. They were laughing with the flight attendants, probably still high on watching you get dragged away. They thought they were in the clear. The Met police team, led by our London legal attaché, swept them up the second they stepped onto the jet bridge. It was perfect." "The victims?" Maya asked. "2 found in a flat in London based on data from the handler's phone. A 3rd was intercepted at the airport, having just been handed off. All safe. All thanks to you, Lincoln. Operation Cross Atlantic is a wrap. It's a clean, textbook win." Maya nodded, but the victory felt hollow, distant. "That's good, sir, that's great." Dalton studied her. "It is. But that's not the win you're thinking about, is it?" "No, sir." "Go home, Lincoln," he said, his voice softer. "Take the week. Mandatory. See the department shrink. Get your shoulder looked at. Don't come back here until Monday. That's a direct order." The week that followed was a strange, disassociated blur. Maya's name was everywhere. The viral video from the gate had been leaked, and with the official confirmation that she was an undercover FBI agent, the story exploded. Hero FBI agent profiled, assaulted by Port Authority police. JFK incident. I fit the description, says cuffed agent. Karma at the gate. The officers, the gate agent, and the CEO fired. Maya watched the news reports from her small, quiet apartment in Queens, a world away from the Brioni suits of the first-class lounge. The hoodie she had worn, her cover, was in an evidence bag on her kitchen table. The consequences, the hard karma, were swift and brutal, delivered with the full, crushing weight of the federal government she served. Officer Nolan, arrogant to the last, had tried to plead not guilty. He'd claimed in his statement that Agent Lincoln was aggressive and that he feared for his safety. The video made him a national laughingstock. Faced with the ironclad testimony of Maya, the plea deal from Shaw, and the forensic evidence from her wrists, his case collapsed. The Port Authority Police Union publicly disavowed him. He was fired, and his trial was set. He was facing a 15-year maximum for a slew of federal charges, and he would almost certainly serve at least 10. Officer Shaw, the man whose silence was his sin, had broken down completely. He'd flipped on Nolan in under an hour, agreeing to plead guilty to felony conspiracy to obstruct justice and deprivation of rights. His testimony against his former partner, in exchange for a recommendation of no prison time, was seen as his only path. He was fired, lost his pension, and as a convicted felon, would never be allowed to own a gun, let alone be a police officer ever again. Brenda Higgins was fired by American Airlines within hours. The airline, facing a multi-billion-dollar civil rights lawsuit from the Department of Justice and a stock price that was plummeting from the PR nightmare, had publicly apologized to Agent Lincoln. They had already settled with the DOJ, agreeing to a massive multi-million-dollar fine and a sweeping federally monitored consent decree to retrain their entire global ground staff in racial bias and de-escalation. Brenda's name was toxic, and her career in aviation was over. Mr. Patterson, the man who started it all, had been met at the gate by FBI agents. He was detained for questioning. While he wasn't charged with a crime, his company, a major investment firm, was not so forgiving. His name was leaked in connection with the obstruction of a major federal anti-trafficking operation. His firm's board of directors, terrified of the legal and public blowback, had convened an emergency meeting. He was fired for gross misconduct and reckless endangerment of the firm's reputation. The multi-million-dollar merger he was flying to London to secure had disintegrated. Maya watched all of this on a screen, feeling like she was observing the life of a stranger. She had won. The bad guys, all of them, from the traffickers to the petty tyrants at the gate, had lost. It was the very definition of justice. So why did she feel so empty? The following Monday, she was back in Dalton's office. It wasn't just the two of them this time. A sharp woman in a dark gray suit with a prosecutor's piercing gaze was also present. "Agent Lincoln, I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney Elizabeth Reed, Civil Rights Division," the woman said, shaking Maya's hand firmly. "I want to personally thank you, and I want to apologize for what you went through." "Thank you, ma'am," Maya said, taking a seat. "We are proceeding with the full weight of the Justice Department," Reed said, opening a file. "Nolan is going to be our poster child for reform. His career is over, and his life as a free man will be too. Shaw is a convicted felon, but I'm here to talk about the future." She slid a document across the table. "This is the consent decree with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Your report, Agent Lincoln, your detailed, precise, and frankly damning account of the systemic failures, was the basis for this. They are implementing the Lincoln reforms." Maya blinked. "The what?" "The Lincoln reforms," Reed said, a small grim smile on her face. "A mandatory top-to-bottom overhaul of their suspicious person protocols. Body cams will now be automatically activated on any civilian interaction. Every officer is undergoing 40 hours of new de-escalation and implicit bias training, with your report as the primary case study." Dalton spoke up. "Your experience, Maya, is now required reading at the Port Authority Academy. You haven't just ended one man's career. You've changed the entire department." Maya looked at the document, at her own name on a federal order. She should have felt proud, elated. Instead, she just felt tired. AUSA Reed seemed to sense it. "This is a monumental victory, Agent. You've done more for civil rights in one day than most lawyers do in a decade. You were the perfect person for this to happen to." Maya's head snapped up. "The perfect person, ma'am?" Reed, a prosecutor, saw the logic. "Yes, you were trained. You kept your cool. You knew the statutes. You documented everything. You are an unimpeachable witness with the backing of the entire FBI. You were the only one who could have weathered this and turned it into this." She tapped the decree. "And what if I wasn't?" Maya asked. her voice quiet but vibrating with a sudden cold intensity that made even the AUSA pause. Dalton, sensing the shift, spoke. "Liz, thank you. We'll take it from here." AUSA Reed, recognizing a different kind of debrief, nodded, gathered her files, and left the room, closing the door softly behind her. Silence. "What if I wasn't an agent, sir?" Maya asked again, her gaze fixed on the skyline. "What if I was just Maya Lincoln, a 25-year-old from Queens going on vacation? What if I was a teacher, or a nurse, or a software developer? What happens to her?" Her voice was low, shaking with the suppressed rage of the entire last week. "I'll tell you what happens. He puts his hands on me. He cuffs me. He drags me through that terminal. He searches my bag and finds a laptop, a paperback, and some snacks. And you know what he does? He arrests me anyway. He arrests me for resisting, for disorderly conduct, for assaulting a police officer because I tensed." She stood up, pacing the office. "And that Maya, she doesn't have ASAC Dalton to call. She doesn't have the U.S. Attorney's Office. She gets a public defender who tells her to take a plea. She has a record. She loses her job. She loses her apartment. Her life is ruined. All because she fit the description. All because a man with a badge and a fragile ego couldn't stand being told no by a black woman." She finally stopped, facing Dalton. The Lincoln reforms. It's a victory, I get it. But it feels like a scar. I won, but only because I had a bigger badge. That's not justice, sir. That's just bigger." Dalton let the words hang in the air. He didn't try to dismiss her anger or placate her. He just listened. Finally, he walked to his desk and picked up the polished, framed shield he kept there as a decoration. He didn't hand it to her. He just held it. "You're 100% right," he said, his voice a low gravel. "That's exactly what would have happened. It's what happens every day in every city in this country. It's a rot. We know it, you know it. And you're right to be angry. Be angry, Lincoln. That anger is a fuel." He looked at the badge in his hand. This is just a piece of metal. It's a symbol. It's a key. It's a shield that protects us, but it burdens us. It's the burden of knowing what happens to the people who don't have one. It's the burden of knowing that the system we're a part of is full of men like Nolan. We just witnessed what happens when prejudice meets power. Maya's story is a chilling reminder of the snap judgments people make every single day. But it's also a powerful fantasy of what true justice can look like. The hard, cold karma that hit officers Nolan and Shaw, Brenda the gate agent, and Mr. Patterson wasn't magic. It was the consequence of their own actions, finally delivered. They thought they were punching down, but they had no idea they were punching a woman who could end their entire world. What did you think of Nolan's downfall? Was it justified? What do you think would have happened if Maya wasn't an FBI agent? These stories are a reminder that heroes and protectors come in all forms. If you love seeing karma deliver justice, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that share button to show your friends what happens when you mess with the wrong person.